Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, here to bring you the Falcons vs. Vikings Week 2 Sunday Night Football preview as we're going to be getting into a critical game for both these teams, probably a little bit more critical for the Falcons coming off a disappointing Week 1 loss at the Bucs where, Younghoe Koo couldn't hit a 44-yard kick to give this team a chance in overtime. And the Vikings coming off a big come-from-behind win against the Bears where they looked pretty dead in the water in the first half, bounced back in a big way against a Bears team that is, pretty well known at this point, almost as much as the Falcons, for getting in their own way in the end of that game and blowing a pretty big lead for the Vikings to crawl back in that one with a strong closing quarter from both sides of the ball. But this is a very important game for Atlanta. There's no doubt about that. Falcons have to find a way to steal a win from someone other than the Panthers, because you got to have the Panthers win. No doubt about that. But you have to find another win in here somewhere. This Vikings game on Sunday Night Football could be an opportunity to do that, but it's certainly not an easy one. So we're going to dive into this matchup. We're going to bring you the final injury report here on Friday, with the Falcons missing quite a few depth players, the Vikings missing quite a few starters, so injuries piling up for Minnesota already in Week 2. That could be a factor in this one as well. We're going to get to all that stuff for you guys today on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast, presented, of course, by FanDuel. Shout out to those guys once again. We're going to dive right into this one. So right off the top, the Falcons, as of Friday afternoon, still 3.5-point underdogs, according to FanDuel. And at this stage, I'm guessing that's unlikely to change much. Atlanta originally began as 4.5-point underdogs, now 3.5 points, which, considering the home field advantage, not a huge spread in favor of the Vikings in this one. I think there's still some trepidation from bettors on McCarthy, considering the sort of Jekyll and Hyde performance in this one. He's also a young quarterback, and the Vikings are pretty riddled with injuries right now. I mean, the Falcons are missing some guys as well, but let's go ahead and get to that report. So the final report here for Atlanta has a few notable names on it. Nothing too crazy. I mean, most of the damage was unfortunately done to the Falcons before the season started. But the good news right off the top, both Drake London and Darnell Mooney have no game designation, so they are both expected to play on Sunday. That's great news. The rest of this report gets a little sketchier. So for the Falcons, we have 4 players declared out. So return specialist Jamal Agnew didn't practice all week with the groin injury he sustained in Week 1. He's out. Safety Jordan Fuller sustained a knee injury at some point, and he did not practice all week. He's out as well. Offensive tackle Jack Nelson, sort of a deep reserve at this stage. He's also out, although he did return to a limited practice on Friday, so his status could be trending up going forward. That would be good. And Casey Washington, the wide receiver, unfortunately did not practice all week with a concussion, and he is out as well. That is not the first concussion for Casey Washington either, so that is unfortunate. We have 3 questionables as well from the Falcons. Safety DeMarco Helms, who was limited all week. We also have James Pierce Jr., the rookie edge rusher. He was limited all week as well. And then Billy Bowman was a late addition to the injury report. He was limited on Thursday with a shoulder injury. Did return to a full practice on Friday, but the team's still calling him questionable. But I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't play, given the return to a full practice. Everybody else is good to go, and there were some people held out for rest on Friday, but nothing meaningful there. The Vikings, on the other hand, have 3 players out. They also have 2 guys that just went on IR. So starting linebacker and signal caller Blake Cashman was placed on IR on Thursday, so obviously he's going to be out for a while. Same thing with the Vikings return specialist Ty Chandler. He will also be out. So those are 2 losses before we even get to the injury report. Vikings also have 3 other players out, and all 3 of them are starters. Left tackle Christian Darrisaw, who's very important to this offense. He is also out. It looked like he was trending towards playing earlier in the week. He was able to practice fully on Wednesday, but then went back down to 2 limited practices afterwards and has been declared out. So that is a major loss there. Andrew Van Ginkel, who is sort of the Vikings do-it-all specialist on the edge. He's known for his knack for pick sixes. He almost had another one on Monday Night Football. He is out with a concussion alongside cornerback Jeff Okudah. Both of those guys declared out. Kuda was a starting quarterback for the Vikings as well. So right now, three defensive starters out and the left tackle out as well. Also, two questionable designations. Starting safety Harrison Smith, who's been limited all week with an illness, is questionable. And then Austin Keys, a reserve linebacker, did practice fully on Friday, but is also being listed as questionable. Everybody else doesn't have a designation. Ryan Kelly, the center, did miss practice on Wednesday and Thursday, but he returned to a full practice and seems to be good to go on Friday. Same thing with Josh Oliver, the tight end. He seems good to go as well. So definitely a number of important players there. I would definitely keep an eye on Ryan Kelly. It doesn't seem like he's going to miss the game, but if he missed most of the week of practice, same thing with Josh Oliver. They're clearly dealing with some injuries. They may not be 100%, even though they're going to be out there. So, this is a situation here where the Falcons are going up against an opponent that has a pretty big home field advantage. It's a tough place to go play. Coming off a big win, but the Falcons actually do have a rest advantage this week of a day. A little over a day, actually, because the Vikings played Monday evening. So the Falcons have the advantage there. That is meaningful. But does it result in a win or a loss change? Maybe not, but it is something to keep in mind here for these two teams. But on paper, I think these two teams are fairly evenly matched. McCarthy's a little bit more of a question mark than Penix is at this point because we've seen 4 games of Penix, 1 game of McCarthy, where McCarthy was basically tale of 2 halves, maybe really tale of 3 quarters versus 1 quarter. Not really sure what to take away from that. The beginning of that game was really ugly, and the fourth quarter was spectacular. So he's probably somewhere in the middle there. That's the most realistic takeaway. And this is going to be a difficult second week performance. The Falcons defense that was actually pretty effective at shutting down Baker Mayfield and the Bucs for the majority of that game, outside of a couple plays here and there. So not going to be easy sledding for this Vikings offense. I do think the Vikings have the better offensive line, clearly, at this point. Christian Darrisaw being out is a major loss for them, but the interior, much better than it used to be. Donovan Jackson, the rookie, seemed like he had a good debut from what I heard. Ryan Kelly, the center, is definitely an upgrade over what they had there before. And Will Fry's big, expensive free agent. So they upgraded the interior of that defense a lot, or offensive line a lot. And Brian O'Neill, one of the NFL's better right tackles when he's healthy. So Falcons probably, they're going to be targeting the left tackle, who definitely was allowing a lot of pressure. That is an opportunity. So hopefully the Falcons will have they'll have Leonard Floyd and everybody else out there, but I'm hoping James Pierce will have some opportunities in this one to go against School, who is a solid swing tackle, but again, not Christian Darrisaw, who's one of the best left tackles in football. So, that's going to be an area for the Falcons to target, and I'm guessing that the Vikings will probably continue to struggle on the ground without Darrisaw. They did not run the ball particularly well in week 1. Although, I think they certainly have the personnel to do it, but everybody on that line seemed to struggle at this point. So, we will see if they can improve it all. The Falcons' run defense was largely good against everyone except Baker Mayfield, so hopefully that will continue. The real meaningful matchups here, I think, are in the passing game, where the Vikings, despite, having not their full complement of receivers, right? They've got Justin Jefferson, so he's great. We know that. But down Jordan Addison, their number 2 receiver, to a suspension. And they also lost Rondale Moore, who was slated to be their 3rd receiver, to an injury earlier this preseason. So the Vikings receivers kind of struggled in this one on Monday Night Football against a Bears secondary that was down a lot of players, including Jalen Johnson, their number 1 corner. They were starting guys off the practice squad, and the Vikings didn't really do a great job until late in that game. Part of that had to do with McCarthy not really being able to hit them, but I think the takeaway message here is that Adam Thielen is still a savvy veteran, but he's not an impact player at this stage of his career, and Jalen Naylor is more of a rotational wide receiver, maybe a wide receiver 3 in the right context, but right now he's being elevated to a top target, and he's not, I don't think, able to deliver on that. So the Falcons secondary, we're still kind of in wait and see mode with Billy Bowman, but I think as a whole, the Falcons secondary is going to be a lot tougher to manage. Justin Jefferson's not just going to be absolutely punking AJ Terrell like he was to some of those Bears corners. And the Falcons safety duo also looks really good. And Xavier Watts had a great rookie outing in his first game against the Bucs, and Jesse Bates is Jesse Bates. So I think that duo, I think the Falcons are going to dedicate 2 guys to Justin Jefferson on every single play. And if they don't, they're making a mistake. And they're going to be, and it's going to be Thielen and Naylor have to beat their guys. Now, Thielen against Billy Bowman, again, Bowman is sort of, we don't really know. He was fine in week 1, largely, but a savvy veteran like Thielen could potentially give him some issues. And then Mike Hughes against Jalen Naylor, who I think Hughes has a good opportunity to win that matchup. I think Emeka Egbuka got the better of him a couple times, but one of those touchdowns was good coverage from Hughes. It was just a perfect throw from Mayfield. I think people in general are too harsh on cornerbacks. Not to say that Hughes was exceptional in that game, but I thought he was largely fine, and I think he'll be largely fine this week. Hopefully he can have a better bounce back game here. But really, the story of this is, can the Falcons get pressure? And the Bears certainly did. They put McCarthy in very difficult places. I think we need to see more from some of these edge rushers, Leonard Floyd in particular. Jalen Walker's still getting his feet under him, but I think Arnold Ebiketie and James Pierce are your top 2 guys right now, and I hope they can have good games here. I think the Falcons got good contributions from the interior too. We'll see how they choose to match up in this game, what they choose to do there, but I think that the Falcons defense should look a lot better this time around than they did last year against this Vikings team, where they got absolutely destroyed in the second half. And their secondary just could not hang with Jordan Addison at all. Really embarrassing performance by the secondary in that one. So I think they're going to be a little bit more confident. And I think they have the personnel like Divine Diablo to match up with Hawkinson better than they did really with anyone last year. So I think the Falcons are probably going to mix it up, be aggressive against McCarthy. We know he makes mistakes. He puts the ball in harm's way a little bit at this stage. And I think they want to get these guys more opportunities for turnovers, where they had opportunities for 4 or 5 last week and didn't capitalize. Definitely would have been the difference in that game if they had. So have to find a way to get your hands on those, because there will be opportunities. Absolutely, there will be opportunities in this one. So turning over to the defensive side of the ball, the offensive side against the Vikings defense, the Falcons offense, I think is very much a question mark right now. They should be better than week 1. That was a very disappointing showing, very reminiscent of week 1 against the Steelers in 2024, where the offense just looked very limited, very vanilla, outside of a couple plays, and at least they scored a touchdown in that game. But, they can't really trust the kicking game. It sounds to me like Younghoe Koo's going to be kicking, which this will probably be his last game kicking, in my opinion. We'll see how it goes. So that means you can't trust your kicking game, and, that's going to be rough. It might be the difference in this game as well. But this is no doubt, this Vikings defense is very aggressive, and they're going to come after Penix, in my opinion. I think that they started to have a lot more success against the Bears when they started coming after Caleb Williams. I think they will try to employ the same strategy here. They did lose Cashman, who's one of their best blitzing linebackers. They did lose, obviously, Andrew Van Ginkel, who's one of their best just overall edge players in terms of what he brings to the table. But they're going to be aggressive, and I think the Vikings have the advantage on the interior. They got 2 good players there in Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen. This is not an easy matchup for the Falcons offensive line, who was largely fine, I guess, against the Bucs, but not really impressive in any facet. Can they run the ball at all? That was a huge problem last week. They need to find ways to get this run game going and avoid getting stuck in the mud. I think running to the right behind Wilkinson is a fine idea. I think he's a fine run blocker. I think they really shied away from that. I don't know if because they didn't trust him with the playbook yet, or just didn't trust him in general. But, Wilkinson's issue, I think, is pass pro. I think he can run block okay. So I wouldn't shy away from that. I would continue to, I think this week you probably can have more success running inside than you did against Vita Vea. So I would continue to pound the inside run if you can. And try to run right at these linebackers for the Vikings, who I love Ivan Pace Jr., one of the biggest Ivan Pace Jr.'s fans, but he's a small linebacker. Same thing with Eric Wilson. They're both undersized linebackers, so run it right at him, see if you can get some big gains there. And the Vikings may very well be operating with, multiple reserve safeties at this point. We'll see how it shakes out, whether Harrison Smith plays, but definitely some opportunities there. This Vikings secondary, I think, is their weakness. Love Josh Metellus, one of the more unique sort of like slot defender players. So he's always going to be someone you have to watch carefully. But I don't really trust the rest of this secondary. I think Isaiah Rodgers is vulnerable. I think Byron Murphy Jr. is vulnerable. He got kind of rocked against the Bears as well. I think Caleb Williams missed a lot of open throws. They're very undermanned. They're down Akuda as well. I think that Vikings secondary is a problem point, and I think if they're going to send a lot of pressure, the Falcons have to be willing to try to hit some shots. Penix, I think one of the best things he showed against the Bucs was his ability to just make a quick decision and get the ball out. And I think you're going to have to match their aggression with aggression of your own, because the way the Vikings play is they want to put pressure on you and they want to take away the quick game. Andrew Van Ginkel's the perfect example of this, where he will oftentimes just fill in expectation of that quick out coming, or the running back coming out of the backfield. He has a number of pick sixes just trying to force the quarterback into that quick game stuff. The way to beat this Vikings team is take advantage of where they're vacating that space, right, which is a little bit further down the field in that more intermediate range, and just be ready to rocket that stuff out there, because you can get big plays against this defense if they're being too aggressive. And the other part is just the best way to limit the Vikings' aggressiveness is to just run the ball at them and force them to respect the run game more. The Falcons failed to do that completely last week against the Bucs, and that's going to be a big deal for this offense. They need to be able to get the run game going, or they're going to have trouble having any sort of sustained success on offense without some kind of run game. And quite frankly, it's not acceptable for this run game to be bad with the talent that these guys have in the backfield. It's just not acceptable. So they got to figure out a way to get that going. Good news, though. Drake London back. He will be playing in this one. Darnell Mooney seems good to go as well. Those are two, major returns. Both of those guys were full participation on Friday in practice. Love to see that. No game status. I think people underrate how important Darnell Mooney is to this offense and what they want to do. Like, I like Casey Washington. I think he's a solid wide receiver, someone that deserves to be in this rotation perhaps, but Darnell Mooney's a lot more dynamic both after the catch and as a downfield presence. Casey Washington doesn't really push the defense down the field at all. He doesn't really demand that type of attention. Darnell Mooney really does, and his presence is going to open up space. And they'll have, assuming he's back healthy. And again, this wasn't a lower body injury or anything like that for Mooney. He should be 100% full go in terms of speed, athleticism, that sort of stuff. I think Mooney's going to be a major guy to watch in this one alongside Kyle Pitts. Again, a lot of linebackers out for this team, safeties out for this team. Pitts could be another guy that the Falcons are looking to target, sort of on those seam routes when the blitz is coming. Just Pitts, turn your head, and we're going to chuck that thing up there if we see the all-out blitz coming, and maybe he can make some big plays there. But I think the way to beat this Vikings team is to return their aggression with aggression of your own. Don't let them sort of force you into quick game stuff. You have to be able to hold up for a second or two against this rush, and you have to be decisive and confident. But I think Penix showed that. He is very decisive, very confident back there under pressure. He's willing to stand in there, and I think that's the recipe for success against this Vikings team. And I'm interested to see how these two sort of units match up, on both sides of the ball. I think the Vikings are still a good team. Again, I think they're like a 10-ish win team this year. I think they do have, they're not going to be as lucky, I think, as last year or as dominant, but the Falcons, I think, are also like a 10-win team. So, I think this is a very even matchup. I think these are two potential wild card sort of teams here, and we'll see how the Falcons fare. But they kind of need to get a win here. They are underdogs, but I think this is an opportunity for them against a team that's also dealing with a number of injuries. Like, you just need to capitalize on one or two of these games that you're going to be an underdog in, to get yourself just above water to survive this opening stretch before the softer part of the schedule comes in. And I think this is an opportunity to do it. I think if the Falcons can find a way to claw a win out of Sunday Night Football on the road, we'll feel a lot better about their trajectory going into the rest of this difficult stretch here, because we'll see how it continues to play out and how things go over the next few weeks. But you feel pretty good going into Carolina in week 2, and the rest of that stretch still looks pretty brutal. But if you could find a way to steal a road win against the Vikings, you're going to feel better about this team's overall ability to hang. And they're not going to win all these games they're underdogs, and that's a given. But they just need to get a couple, and I think this is a good opportunity to do that, and just give some maybe pump the brakes on the panic a little bit. 1-1 is totally fine. 0-2 is, we all know what that means, right? 11% of teams that start 0-2 make the playoffs. So maybe one team in the NFL that between 1 and 3 teams every year that start 0-2 will make the playoffs. Maybe one. It just doesn't happen very often. So maybe the Falcons can be the exception this year, but for the most part, you start 0-2, you're dead. So we'll see. Hopefully the Falcons can avoid that very, very troubling statistic, get back in the win column this week against a Vikings team that I think, again, will be very competitive and strong throughout the season, but has some flaws of their own that I think some teams will be able to take advantage of this year. And we'll see how that plays out. But thank you guys so much for joining us here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast, presented by FanDuel. And yeah, we will be back on Sunday, of course, for the post-game show with Alan Stirk on Sunday Night Football. We'll be back pretty late, obviously, for that. Then we will have a Tuesday Takes for you guys early next week with Trayshawn, and then still TBD on live for week 3 because I'll be flying that day. So assuming everything's all good with the flight, I can try to do a live on Wednesday, but otherwise we'll have a game preview for you guys as usual, and then the usual post-game coverage of week 3 against the Panthers. But stay tuned for more information about live, assuming that the travel goes okay there. But thank you guys so much. Really appreciate everyone for hanging out with us today on Dirty Birds and Brews. Looking forward to a fun Sunday night game. Hopefully no more injuries for either of these teams, and we can stay healthy going into week 3, hopefully with a big dub, the Falcons coming out on top. I'm taking the Falcons in this one because I do think they've performed historically. The Falcons performed terribly in week 1. They're like 1-7 over the last 8 week 1 games, and I think they're much better in week 2 typically. So for whatever that's worth, that should help them. I also feel like the Falcons are a 1-1 sort of team, not really an 0-2 sort of team. So hopefully the games will bear that out, and they can kind of take advantage of a hurting Vikings team here and steal a win in prime time. That will keep all of us feeling just a little bit better about the direction of this season in the very, very early stages. So guys, thanks for hanging out. We'll see you next time on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. That really helps us out. Leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. And yeah, if you want to support the show, you can join us on Patreon, patreon.com/FalconHawkLive, or join up with the YouTube channel memberships. Appreciate everyone pitching in there. Really helps us. We appreciate it. Thanks, guys. And yeah, we will see you guys late Sunday night for Falcons versus Vikings post-game show. May it be the first positive post-game show of the season. That's what I'm hoping for. Have a good day, guys. Thanks.